So RebelMouse is a CMS platform, basically high-value websites, meaning they're high traffic or it's a real digital business. And so we have over 100 enterprise customers, and between them, we reach over 100 million people monthly in the US. So we look for, like Penske, the U-Haul competitor, United Airlines, like big brands, and then big media companies, The Independent, Brit & Co., Raw Story, Upworthy. So that's our customers, is you've got a real digital business and you need it to perform at the highest level. Startup culture has definitely been not just in the blood, but in the time I spent. And then, we helped start, my wife and I started actually a family social network photo sharing company at the same time that I was helping build Avaz.org from a startup concept. And I was doing that while starting to work on Huffington Post. So that's my true love. I think when you get into like the corporate stuff, I worked for Stephen Ross at Related Capital, which is like Stephen Ross is a billionaire real estate mogul. And, I think the thing that really mattered to me is that, I always have fought my way out of boxes. There's the box for being cisgender, and here I am trans, and then I'm a white Mexican, which really trips people up. And so I always knew I didn't fit in a box, but I found in my career too, the moment you write code, and you can be a developer, there's a box that they have you for there too, where they don't expect you to care about contagious media or revenue. You're supposed to be the nerd that writes code. So what was really special about Huffington Post, and why I love Jonah Peretti and Ken Lear were kind of like the co-founders underneath it that found Ariana to be public face for it, and she's amazing. But Jonah and Kenny are the two that I had a deep background with. And what I loved about Huffington Post is that it wasn't just CTO run tech. I ran product design as well as engineering. And when you can do that, then it becomes, my metaphor is that often tech is treated like a waiter instead of a chef. And when tech can play the role of the chef, then it's more like, look, I think we should start a Cuban, Latin, Asian fusion restaurant. And then, okay, then the chef can go to work. And too often, I think tech is given the solution instead of the problem.
What was the ideation behind RebelMouse?
Well, at HuffPost, the reason we got acquired was in very large part the technology. Like if I didn't go over with the acquisition wasn't happening. And because people struggle so deeply, CMS has been traditionally built by more like IT people that don't understand editorial and don't understand contagious media. They're just kind of building the technology and an IT perspective. And the other thing is that we have this real problem that we're solving, which is that the open web is in threat by the like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, ending up consuming all of our time. And I believe deeply in the open web, but it needs to be built as fast. Consumer expectations rise. So what you end up having, even if you're AOL size, is that your technology starts to get way behind. The site's slow, clumsy, etc. And the model, WordPress is the largest CMS platform in the world. The model is pre-cloud. Every instance is its own. It's kind of like having a Microsoft Exchange server. You need your spam rules. Why is my Exchange server down? All of that world still applies to CMS world. And that's what we're disrupting, is put it multi-tenant in the cloud with a SaaS product where your site can keep up with the speed of Google and Facebook, which is just very hard to do. And I think when you start a company, what I've seen over time of being an investor and being an advisor for VCs, so trying to be a mentor too, doing a startup is always exponentially harder than you thought it would be. So what I find is that people end up failing and falling out when they pick something that was shiny and attractive, but it didn't truly who they are. Then 4 years in, when it gets really hard, then they just abandon it. Because why did I start this fucking company? It's not even what my passion is. I just got distracted. So I do advise that it's never going to be as fast as you hoped. And so could you see 2 decades of your life? Is it your identity? Is that who you are? And this is me. I just absolutely love the working with the clients, building this, heading towards hundreds of millions of people that we reach every month. It's my passion.
What were some of the early day challenges, even though this was like very much within your wheelhouse? Like, how'd you start to get those early logos in and that kind of stuff? Was it through a calling card already that you already had with that relationship and being a part of Huffington Post? And did you leverage a lot of that as like the social proof for the early days and getting the first few customers in, or how did that work?
Yeah, I think your greatest strength in life is usually also your greatest weakness at any moment. Like Manhattan is densely populated, makes it awesome and makes it horrible. For me, I wasn't starting a company as an 18-year-old unproven, who is this person? It was very easy to raise money. Because all the HuffPost investors and management team became investors and had all this money and success, and I had a very positive, strong relationship with them. So raising the first 7 million and really even the first 20 was really easy. And I don't mean it sounds like I'm bragging, but I don't mean it that way. It actually was I wish it in some ways. I don't play life by regrets and everything, but it actually probably would have been much healthier for me personally and for the company if it had been harder for me to raise that capital. What we did, and we ended up, I have really incredible investors. So you'll meet entrepreneurs who hate their board or hate the investors. That's not the way I feel about them. They've been supportive and constructive and helpful. But when you raise a lot of capital, the pressure to grow fast means you make compromises. And in my case, I compromised the culture that I actually wanted. And I see this happen a lot. Like a founder will talk about the culture they have. And just to be totally honest and transparent, I would talk about our culture, and in the pit of my stomach was an impending sense of doom building, because that was the culture that I talked about wasn't the culture that I had. And to hit the numbers that you need to hit when you've raised all this capital, what you end up doing is, like, especially salespeople, but also engineers, you'll end up that I turned a blind eye to people who were toxic. But, at HuffPost, I thought about it a lot, that there was this buckets of people who you can do by drama and output. And those of us who were like low drama, high output, ended up making a lot of money and being successful with it. The people who were high drama and low output ended up leaving the company fast. We got rid of them. They're so annoying, and everyone's like, please get rid of them. And they never made it 3 months. The hard people for any startup are the people who are high drama and high output. And so when you have a salesperson that's selling to a client, it's misaligned expectations. They sell a zebra when you have an elephant, and then you're like, oh no, you close that deal, and what do you do about that? And also you find that they treat other people terribly. I would spend a lot of my day apologizing for people. I'm sorry she said that. She doesn't actually mean it. I know she's kind of like sociopathic, but she's a high performer. So I know he's kind of a dick. I'm so sorry. I'm working on it, instead of letting him go. And the best thing that happened to RebelMouse was that we almost ran out of capital. We were spending a lot. Our burn was $800,000 a month at the peak of stupidity. And so many expensive hires and so much drama. And it became apparent the next round I was going to need to raise would have been a $25 million round on like a $100 million val pre. And we didn't have the numbers to support it. So that raise wasn't going to happen. At some point, it becomes the first X amount of million when you've done, you were part of a successful company and you were in the management team. People will throw that first capital at you pretty fast. But at some point, it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter your personality, it's the numbers. And I value honesty a lot. I hate people who spin things. So I couldn't spin it. And so we had at some point, it was like very clear that without any change, we had 6 months left before we run out and that no one was going to raise it. That allowed me to make a radical change in the company and get rid of all the toxic people. Also, I hate offices. I always have. And yet we have this fancy office in Soho in Lower Manhattan. And we got rid of the office, went totally distributed, got rid of all the toxic people, focused on the people who are actually aligned with the mission. And it changed my life personally from, those 2 years where before that moment were the 2 hardest years of my career. No doubt. And I literally woke up every day with an impending sense of doom. How are we going to hit these goals? What do I do with this person? Oh my God, we sold this thing to some client. And I said yes, because it's a big bookings value. I think it's Warren Buffett who was saying, that every key business decision he made was based on his own personal happiness. And when I heard that, I was like, duh, of course. And it was right at the right time where we had to go through this big reform. And now I'm just so proud that we're in a place where we make enough revenue. We don't actually turn it into profit because we're using it as growth capital. The goal is never to actually have profits, but we haven't needed to raise capital in 4 years, and we're growing as a business. And so to be at that place where I don't have to worry about venture capitalists and raising new capital, and I can keep our culture and happiness as the #1 priority has just been really incredible for my life. Part of contagious media and the work we do is it's telling stories. And stories that are memorable and stick, which is the really hard part in an age of information overload, is what sticks with you. So I really love names that tell a story because then they can stick with us.
Quite a few components of the business, right? You have the actual enterprise tech that you are selling to some of these content companies in order for them to operate at these lightning speeds to be competitive. But at the same time, you have a creative side, right, where you're still creating what you're calling contagious media, and tell me a little bit more about that. And I feel that seems to be something that you've seen that at least you're also very equally passionate about, is the idea of content creation and contagious media, and what does that look like, and how you're participating in that on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's when you get a proposal from us, there's 2 parts of it in almost every case, is the SaaS license, and then there's the creative agency work we do. And there are a lot of sites that are RebelMouse, what we call DIY, where we give you the platform, we give you training to your CTO, and Outvoices is a wonderful recent example. They experience tremendous growth. But the creative agency work, we do strategy, design, and development work. And I'm really proud of that work we do. I do enjoy it a lot. That's where we help take all of this. When I was at HuffPost, we had a lot of data and we had a lot of insights, but it was for our site. And I dreamed of I tried to have lots of friends in the industry and try to extract clues to did you go up in Google recently too? Or did you fall in Facebook? And was it an algo change, or was it just us? Or, and so for for me, that's kind of like the dream has come true, where we have over 100 million unique visitors of data across over 100 high-value sites, where we have all the data. If we were just a SaaS vendor, we wouldn't get access to that data necessarily. But because we're trusted as a strategic partner and not just a vendor, then we get all this data. And the reason they trust us is because we have all this data. So we can tell you what works, what UX works, why it works, and then positioning and audience development. And you're right, it's something that I enjoy a lot. It makes me happy to work at that level. Like if we were just SaaS completely, it would feel a little bit too IT and being a vendor. And we want to balance it because obviously the most valuable revenue that we have is SaaS revenue. But it is a nice model for us because we tend to do most of the heavy work of the strategic creative agency work in the setup and in getting them pointed the right way in that launch. And then a few months after launch, follow it. And then we have clients like a paper mag. I love them. Beautiful content, amazing, so good for society. And it was a heavy lift for about 5 months. And 8 years later, they pay us monthly on SaaS. And we do some creative work on top of it, every quarter. Very light. And so it's very sticky, the work we do. And it's not just this one-time services that then you're like never see them again. It's they're on your platform. So I really like that combination for us.
Yeah. So, is there any suggestions, recommendations, activities that you do for team building, or how do you how do you look to hire? Number one, is there certain questions, traits that you look for?
First thing most important about our model is that we are totally distributed. So it really doesn't matter where you are in the world. It matters where your passions are and lies, and does that really intersect? So we get an incredible amount of talent to look at because we're not just looking in New York or in San Francisco or wherever you're in that geographic radius. We also, I'm very proud, most people when they hire internationally, there's this incredible unconscious bias that happens. So if you take a manager, a CEO, a SVP, whatever it is, and they're hiring, and they meet the person in their office, and the person's from a college that they know, so they graduated from Cornell, they might have an entry-level position for them. But straight from the job interview, they're creating a path 90% of the time for this person. Of look, it'll start here, and if you get really good at it, then you'll end up being able to do this next and that next and so on. What is shocking when you look at what the state of the industry is now is almost nobody does that internationally. They say, oh, we found a CSS developer in Brazil. Great. Do they ever see if that person wanted more than CSS? Do they care about audience development, SEO? Do they want to go beyond CSS to Python and back end? There's almost no job growth there. There's just a job for essentially a task monkey. And so for us, it's really important that we are actually seeing the people behind it. So for example, our chief creative officer, she started in a young woman in Serbia as a junior account manager. And it became obvious to anyone working with her within the first few weeks that this is a brilliant person. And very few companies give real opportunities to that type of person. So that's when we say building it in a different way. For technology companies that are like 10 or 15% women and like 5% LGBT, we're like 68% women and 40% LGBT. There's 90 of us in 29 countries. And that's really important to our culture, that we find people when, in interviewing, obviously you look for people who they don't hate their last job and hate everyone and hate every other job, because then you're going to hate everyone also. Like positive, we look for people like it's no screaming, no yelling, no blame game, no low drama, high output. And that really matters to us because the high output, high drama people, sometimes you just need to talk them through it. They're taking a last culture and they're applying all their panic and all their stress, and you have to tell them, chill out. Like, you're stressing everyone else out who works with you, but we confront it right away. And either they resolve it or honestly, they're not a part of the company. And 99% of the time, it actually turns out that they deeply appreciate being in an environment that checks that they actually hated that about their last company, even though their instincts of acting that way had started to kick in. So I think it's just really important if you're going to have, high performance teams, they have a shared characteristic, which is it is about the weakest link, right? So if you end up having a high performance team, but then there's one person who just feels really comfortable being an asshole to people, you can't have a good culture if you support it. So when you think about scaling and maintaining it, Jonah Goodhart is an incredible CEO. He built Moat and then built a few companies before that. When I was asking him for advice, he's like, look, the way I look for it is that we like people who are really quiet when they talk. No screamers, no flamboyant, da-da-da-da-da. I like them to be quiet and da-da-da, because we're going to have problems and we're going to have fires. And I want to know that the team working on it stays positive, keeps their cool, doesn't devolve into drama. And I think those are like, we have a whole thing about using queerness as your superpower. So being flamboyant, being expressive is definitely part of our culture. That's fine and fun, but definitely not turning to drama, turning to blame game, all those things. I think if you can scale a culture, if you actually act on it and don't just keep making exceptions.